Hey everyone, it's your buddy back again with another exciting fanfic, which is what if Naruto built a legendary harem with village beauties Hinata, Tenten and Hanabi, Part 2. If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fanfics like this. Now, let's dive right into the fanfic. The Kumo Nin waited patiently on the rooftop, eyeing off his target. From the information he had been given, either of the two females would be the perfect target, but he had to be cautious. If he was careless, the alarms would be sounded and he would have an incredibly difficult time getting out of the village in one piece, let alone with the prize. The sole problem was the Hyuga kid in the center of the training ground who had his bloodline activated. He knew that if the kid's eyesight was stronger he would have already been noticed, but since he was so young he assumed that his range didn't reach him, otherwise he would have already been spotted. Knowing all of this, he slyly slid back into the shadows, awaiting the opportune moment. Is that really what could happen? Asked Sakura, Ino having just told her the possibilities of what could happen. While at first she had believed it was far-fetched, the more Ino had described it the more Sakura found herself believing it. It wasn't like Ino had any reason to lie to her like this. As far as I understand, said Ino. Maybe we should ask your father, suggested Sakura. What do you think we should ask him? Because the rest of us girls said we weren't going to tell anybody anything, said Ino, her voice lowering slightly to push forward the urgency in her statement. We should just ask him the dangers of multiple personality disorder. He could help us figure something out, said Sakura. I guess you're right, said Ino, thinking it over. Apart from what Q had told her, she was practically clueless about everything else. The girls nodded at one another before leaving the sanctuary of Ino's room and made their way into the kitchen. There they found Inoichi Yamanaka sharing a drink with Shikaku Nara, the father of Shikamaru. Earlier her father's other friend had been there, but apparently his son had gotten some type of stomach virus and had to make sure that he was okay. Hey there sweetie, said Inoichi seeing the two girls. Dad, Mr. Nara, said Ino being polite. Call me Shikaku, said the Nara with a sigh. Mr. Nara sounds too troublesome. Okay, well we have a question, said Sakura acting innocent. Go ahead, we'll answer whatever you want, said Inoichi with a smile as Shikaku had a swig of sake. What are the dangers with multiple personality disorder? Asked Ino. For a few moments everything was silent in the household before the word, troublesome, was muttered from the elder Nara. Why do two want to know about something like that? Curiosity, said Sakura, not sounding all too convinced by it herself. Right, said Inoichi, dragging out the word, didn't expect that. The dangers of multiple personality disorder is that the person won't recall what they did in their other personality. They might have flashbacks of their time, but apart from that it is hard to tell. Also, if the other form is aggressive they might wake up as their original selves and find themselves in jail or something like that. You said that they may have flashbacks. Does that mean if you learn something in one personality you'll know it in the other? Asked Sakura. It may be two personalities but they share the same brain, said Shikaku with a sigh. It's not something which is easily tested, as information gathering on something like that is troublesome. It is possible, they might not remember learning something like that, which may lead to future problems. Is it limited to information or is it also physical? Asked Ino. I take it you're talking about a ninja here, said Inoichi. Again, if they were to learn a certain jutsu they might be able to use it on the battlefield, but they may have no memory of how they learned it or the applications to use it. As my buddy here put it, it can lead to troublesome outcomes. I see, well thanks for that daddy, Shikaku sir, said Ino, to which the two men nodded to her and Sakura before they went back upstairs to discuss it further. What do you think that was all about? Asked Inoichi to his friend. It'd be too troublesome to find out, said Shikaku as he took another swig of sake. Neji eyed Naruto off, his eyes penetrating every tenketsu pore on Naruto's body. He had to admit though, for a child younger than he was, he contained a vast amount of chakra, something one wouldn't expect to see until a ninja had reached Chunin rank. He silently prayed that Naruto didn't know any powerful techniques, otherwise this would not end well. His hand slid into his kunai pouch before throwing said weapon at the blonde. Naruto only moved the slightest of margins to avoid the blade, missing his cheek by mere millimeters. In that time though, Neji had charged forward, intent on closing up Naruto's tenketsu. Neji was reeling across the ground in pain, a small cloud of dust kicking up. He raised his head and shook it, feeling trickles of blood running down from a cut in his forehead. He had had no time to react when Naruto had charged at him. From experience, he knew that when people fought against a Hyuga they were very defensive in order to keep their flow of chakra open. What Naruto had just done was something he had never expected. Looking at Naruto, he could see that he hadn't moved after the attack, his elbow still where it had been when it had struck Neji's forehead. "I get it now," he said as he got to his feet. "The reason your knees are bent this time is to increase your opening momentum. In that stance you are able to launch yourself at your target faster than your maximum speed, however you can only do it in short bursts. Some mistakes I intend to fix," said Naruto as he charged forward, the wind sweeping through his blonde hair. Neji quickly got into the horse stance, his body facing Naruto's head on. "Horse stance?" said Hanabi confused. Her father had instructed her on all of the different forms, and while she wasn't able to use any of them yet she knew their uses. "That's right, it's not every day you see Neji-kun in a defensive stance," said Hinata, her eyes not leaving the bout. Hanabi looked up at her sister, confusion in her eyes. "Cousin Neji is losing?" she asked. Hinata swung her head from side to side. "No, it's not like that. Neji-kun may be physically stronger and have the Byakugan, but Naruto has hit first and has gained a mental advantage," she explained. Hanabi simply nodded, some of the information simply going over her head, but she understood the general gist of it. Naruto threw his fists forward multiple times, but each time it was either brushed to the side or dodged with a tilt of the head. The good thing was though that he was keeping Neji on the defensive, meaning he had gained the psychological advantage. Lessening his attack, he tilted his knees slightly before springing forward, tackling Neji in the chest while driving his shoulder into the Hyuga's stomach. Neji felt his breath leave him as the wind was knocked out of his body. Knowing he had to make the most out of this opportunity as they were both floating lightly off the ground, he grabbed Naruto's shoulders before driving his knee into the boy's chest. Naruto grunted in pain before both he and Neji skidded across the dirt. Neji got to his feet first and charged at Naruto, who was still struggling to get his breath back. On his hands and knees, he saw Neji cocking a fist back and he could do nothing but put his arms in front of his head to protect it. The force of the punch sent Naruto skidding back several feet before his back rammed against a large stone boulder. Gathering his bearings, he saw Neji coming at him again, but this time with his hands in open palm rather than a brawler's fist. Neji sent his palm towards Naruto's chest, but he leapt over it and onto the top of the boulder. Neji's palm hit the stone with everything he had, causing a spider web of cracks to form. Naruto leapt over Neji and as his feet hit the ground he twisted and launched a punch at the back of Neji's head. Due to his Byakugan, Neji was able to see the attack coming and moved out of the way. Naruto's fist connected where Neji's palm had. The result was almost instantaneous. His fist hit the boulder with such force that the number of cracks it created were almost 100 more in number than Neji's. Some parts of the stone had been chipped and small rocks found their way onto the ground. Neji paled slightly, knowing that if he had been hit by something like that he would easily to have gone to the hospital. If it could almost shatter stone, he didn't want to know what it could do to bone. Although that worry was replaced as he saw another person enter his field of vision at lightning speed. He turned around just in time to see Hinata drop to the floor unconscious as Hanabi squealed through a gag, a tall masked man holding her tucked under one arm. In a flash he was gone as Neji's jaw dropped. He quickly turned to Naruto to formulate a plan but found the blonde ninja no longer there. He decided to worry about it later. At the moment he needed to tell somebody what had happened. The Kumo nin crept through the edge of the Hyuga compound, heading towards the forest when a patrol squad forced him to hide in the foliage of a tree. Hanabi squealed again and the ninja sighed before chopping her lightly at the base of the neck, knocking her out in an instant. He waited another minute for the patrol to pass before he dropped to the ground and was about to make his move when he found his path blocked by the blonde-haired kid who had been fighting the Hyuga. "Move it, brat, or I'll kill you," he threatened in an attempt to scare the kid. "People have been trying to kill me every day of my life," said Naruto coldly as he withdrew a kunai from his pouch. "Now you come and take one of the few people who actually accept me for who I am and expect me to let you take them away." I'll kill you for that. Naruto leapt forward with the same speed he had used against Neji earlier, but against this ninja it was almost nothing. The ninja dodged with ease before doing several hand seals with difficulty due to holding the Hyuga girl under an arm before thrusting his spare arm forward, 2 fingers piercing the boy's flesh. Before Naruto could scream after having 2 fingers jabbed into his chest, the man's jutsu took effect as a small wave of lightning infiltrated his body, causing it to jerk violently. The man pulled his fingers out of Naruto's chest, the boy's body collapsing to the ground without a sound. Even though it had been a weak jutsu, the man knew that it was enough to keep the boy down, and if he wasn't taken to a hospital within the next half an hour he would surely die. He didn't care though, since he could now continue his mission. He turned away only to find a larger threat standing in his way, the head of the Hyuga family having just come from out the opening with Neji by his side. The first thing Neji saw was Naruto's body lying on the ground, a small pool of blood glowing in the moonlight. His fists clenched together so tightly that his nails pierced the skin of his palm, drawing blood. He was about to lunge forward in a blind rage before Hiashi placed a calming hand on the boy's shoulder. He knew better than to rush straight in. Knowing that the situation had drastically changed, the Kumo ninja pulled out a kunai and held it at Hanabi's throat, causing Hiashi to flinch in fear of his daughter's safety. "Let me through and you may see her alive again," he threatened. Hiashi quickly played the scenarios over in his mind, each ending worse than the last. His instincts as a father told him to stand his ground. He would not allow his daughter to be taken away. "Last time, you piece of shit, let me." He never got to finish his statement as Naruto lunged onto his back, driving his kunai through the man's throat. Hanabi dropped lightly to the ground as the man's hands reached for his neck as he dropped to his knees, the weight of Naruto on his back however forcing him to the ground. Naruto was relentless as he pulled the kunai from the man's throat before driving it into his back time and time again. Neji was frightened as blood flew out of the stab wounds to cover Naruto in the man's blood. Hiashi swallowed nervously as well. He was happy for the fact that his daughter was safe, but the scene that Naruto was painting at the moment was not a pretty one. Naruto finally stopped, pulling the kunai from the man's back for a final time before time seemed to stand still as his adrenaline rush came to an end. The kunai dropped limply from his hand as he stared at his blood-covered hands. Neji calmly walked up to his friend, hoping to calm the boy down slightly. "Naruto," he said softly. "Are you alright?" he asked as he put a hand on Naruto's shoulder. The force of the backhand Naruto delivered off instinct was enough to send the Hyuga boy crashing into the compound wall, knocking him out. Naruto just stared at what he had just done before he lifted his head up into the air and yelled at the top of his lungs in a primal scream. As Hiashi snapped out of stupor at what had occurred, he saw Naruto sprinting into the woods as fast as his legs could take him, screaming all the while. He wanted to go help the boy, but he knew that Naruto needed time alone to realize what he had done and come to grips with the fact that he had claimed a life. He wished that Naruto wouldn't have needed to spill blood so early in his life, but there was nothing he could do to change it. In front of him he could see members of the Konoha police force charging towards the scene, and he sighed as he knew he was going to have a lot of explaining to do. "Take his head," shouted Yukihiro in the middle of the council meeting. News of Naruto's exploits had spread like wildfire in his killing of the Kumo ninja. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, sighed as the banshee's screaming was getting to his head. He was worried about Naruto though. While he had killed a ninja which was impressive in its own right, it was also a ninja who they had just made peace with their village. The only benefit is that they could choose to simply push the information under the rug, as to say that one of your top ninjas had been killed by a mere child would cause more humiliation than anything else. "I would rather lose my own head than see the life of the child who saved my daughter's life be taken," shouted Hiashi. For a number of years he had remained silent during the trials and tribulations which surrounded the Uzumaki boy, but this was something he would not stay quiet on. Neji had also been brought to the meeting as an eyewitness to what had happened, although the bandages wrapped tightly around his ribs showed that he had recently visited the hospital. "He's killed an enemy ninja, a powerful one at that. Clearly he has access to the demon's power," shouted a random civilian, getting the civilian half of the council to yell alongside his claim. "If he had used the demon's power, every single ninja in the village would have known about it," shouted Sume, leader of the Inuzuka clan. Be that as it may, he has killed someone without any training. What's to stop him from attacking anyone in the village? Questioned another civilian. If he opts to kill anyone who made his life hell, you know that you deserved it, said Shikaku, having seen the cruelty delivered to the boy firsthand. This comment, while it may have been true, sent the civilians into an uproar, shouting about how the demon deserved it. If he's this powerful now, we should prevent him from going to the academy, started Yukihiro, only to get cut off. He will go to the academy and become a powerful ninja worthy of wearing the symbol of the leaf, stated Sarutobi, silencing the mob-like crowd. What we need to do at the moment is find him and make sure he is safe. Neji, as he is your friend, do you know where he might have gone since his apartment was destroyed? Neji was about to answer when another civilian shouted their opinion. How can a Hyuga such as yourself see scum like him as a friend when he attacked you after he killed that trained ninja? Neji found himself on his feet, pointing an accusing finger at the man who had interrupted him. I may not have known him for long, but there is nobody I know better that I would willingly call my friend, he shouted, causing the civilians to go quiet. He then turned to face the Hokage. When he was upset yesterday, I trailed him and found him sitting outside the gate of the Yondaime's mansion. Sarutobi nodded in understanding, trying to mask his smirk about the irony of it all before the doors to the council swung open wide, revealing a young Chunin who looked out of breath. Lord Hokage, while training, my team and I saw someone break into the Yondaime's mansion. He shouted. Sarutobi's eyes went wide before he had to cover his ears from the sheer noise the members of the council made. Naruto's eyes shot open, his breathing heavy as he sat up, sweat dripping off his forehead. He lifted his hands up to cover his face, rubbing his eyes of their sleep. It was then that he noticed something very peculiar. Where am I? Looking around, he found himself in what looked like the penthouse suite of any hotel. Majestic murals hung on the wall, which was painted a shade of orange, not a bad color, he thought. The bed he was in was exceptionally large. He was sitting in the center and it didn't look like he could reach anywhere near the edge. It was then that he noticed what he was dressed in and ran down the hall screaming, wondering why he was dressed in an overly large nightgown. The lacy material got caught on his feet and he tripped, his face making a solid thud as it hit the wooden floorboards underneath him. His face raised up from the ground, his face scrunched up in a growl with the knowledge that what he was wearing would only survive another few seconds. He stood upright, stark-gnawed in the middle of a hallway. Instinctively he covered his crotch in case anybody saw him in such an indecent position. Something at the back of his mind told him that nobody was around, but he wasn't taking any chances. With top speed he made his way back to the original bedroom and slammed the door behind him. He waited there with his back against the door, knowing that if somebody had heard it they would be coming to investigate. Minutes passed before he released his breath, standing on his own 2 feet. Calm down, have a shower, get some clothes on, then figure out what the hell is going on, he instructed himself, having already exasperated his adrenaline rush. Walking to a door on the other side of the room, Naruto casually walked in before stepping into the shower. His hands reached for the nozzles before they froze in place as a question came into his mind. How did I know where the bathroom was? Nearly half an hour later, Naruto was found on the first floor of the mansion wearing clothes he had found in one of the drawers. Like the nightgown, which he was certain would scar his memory for a long time to come, the clothes had been too big. He had found the tightest fitting ones, the shorts needing a leather belt, before he grabbed a pair of scissors. From the amount of dust which had accumulated on the clothes he had found, he figured that he was in an abandoned house that some money-hungry person must have owned. Since they hadn't been worn in such a long time, he figured that he could do with them as he wished. As such, Naruto stood in a pair of underwear he had found while cutting the clothes to his size. As he finished clothing himself, he found a mirror to look into. He wore a dark brown shirt over a black undershirt with beige shorts being held around his waist by a brown leather belt. There were still fragments of dust on the clothes, but he couldn't help it, he would wash them at a later date. From looking in the mirror he could see that his hair was in desperate need of a cut, being down past his shoulders in length while he had grown at least 3 inches since he had last checked. What's happened to me? He asked, knowing he would get no answer. With a sigh he decided to have a look around, leaving the cutting of his hair to somebody who wouldn't do a botch job. He made his way towards the living room with no idea how he managed to explore this room without once getting lost, as if he'd already visited each rooms multiple times in the past while having no recollection of when he had done so. He stopped in his tracks and tapped his finger on his chin several times, trying to think of whether or not a memory-erasing jutsu existed. While plausible, that wouldn't explain why he woke up in a mansion alone and there was no real purpose behind it. He found himself in the library, a furnace still smelling of fresh ash over on the far side of the room. Naruto knelt down at a coffee table, looking over the dozens of scrolls spread out over them. He picked one up at random and looked over it, noticing the large B in the corner. B-rank jutsu, he said slowly, looking over the hand seals required to see that they numbered well over a dozen. He didn't know how he recognized the hand seals for what they were, but after waking up in a nightgown, not much could scare him at the moment. He looked at the other sheets of paper and noticed that a vast majority of them were jutsus, although the one he held was the highest ranking. Everything else was either C or D ranking. One parchment caught his eye and he placed the one he was holding down and picked that one up. Looking it over, he saw detailed descriptions of how to perform and mold each hand seal. The person who wrote these must have been a genius, he muttered, putting the parchment down as his stomach growled loudly. Without hesitation he made his way to the kitchen as if it was second nature, once again not bothering to question how he instantly found the place. He looked at the fridge and the overly large freezer beside it. Opening the freezer, his eyes widened slightly at the vast number of frozen meals inside, enough to feed a family of 4 for a siege lasting half a year. Closing it, he pulled open the fridge beside it and pulled out a handful of eggs. Moving around the kitchen with grace, he cracked the eggs on the bench before placing the bounty inside on the frying pan he had prepared, red flames cracking away underneath it. As the third and final egg hit the metal, he froze once again. Knowing his way around the house was one thing, but as far as he could recall, he had never cooked a day in his life, since he would never be sold fresh ingredients. Yet here he was preparing eggs as if it was a day-to-day habit. He vowed that when he left he would see the Hokage and check out whether or not he could answer any of his problems. After washing up his dishes, another thing he did for what seemed the first time, he made his way to the door and stepped outside. On his left was what seemed like a vegetable garden. Numerous edible plants lay in rows after rows. On his right was a training ground, numerous kunai and shuriken embedded into straw dummies. One such dummy was split in half, a large horizontal cracked indent in the cement wall behind it. Naruto swallowed deeply, scared, wondering who had the power to do such a move which could potentially dismember someone. Of all the kunai sticking in the dummy, only one was not, and it was embedded in the ground roughly 5 feet from where the dummy was placed. Not letting curiosity get to him, Naruto walked towards the gate, noticing the color to the metal bars, a silver color he had only seen once before guarding any property. Naruto's jaw dropped as he slowly turned around, immediately recognizing the exterior of the mansion as that of the Yondaime. Naruto froze for a bit, simply staring at the building with the knowledge that he had possibly stayed in the same bed as that of his idol. It made him feel giddy inside, and it took all of his self-control to stop him from jumping up and down in joy. Breathing deeply, he turned back towards the gate. He walked forward a bit before grabbing one of the rails and pulling, only for the thing not to budge an inch. Tilting his head upwards slightly, he saw the seal which prevented anyone from entering the encampment, and it seemed from exited. Naruto looked at his hand, then back at the seal, and swallowed before placing his hand directly in the center of the seal. He waited patiently for a moment before a latch seemed to unclick and the gate swung open slightly. Naruto stepped outside the gates before grabbing the metal bar and closing it behind him. As the gate slammed shut, he felt a pair of hands on his shoulders and a slight jab to the neck before his world went black. Quote. He got in there somehow. No doubt it was the demon helping him. You're getting in over your head, you have no proof that that was the cause. There's no proof that it wasn't the cause. Perhaps the seal is a basic blood one, and one simply needs to have the same blood type as the Yondaime. I will not accept any petty excuses. These were the words that Naruto groggily awoke to as two sides of the council shouted at one another with hellfire and fury. As he sat up from where he was laid, he could see Hiashi looking at the civilians with fire in his usually emotionless eyes. Whatever they were talking about was clearly causing some stirs. Analyzing specific people, he figured out that the side Hiashi was on was the shinobi half of the council, meaning the other half was solely made out of civilians. What's going on? He said quietly, despite that the entire council went silent as all heads turned towards him. Ah, you're awake, Naruto, said Sarutobi from his podium to Naruto's left, causing the boy to look up at the man he considered family. Hey Gramps, he said casually. You will address him as Hokage-sama, you brat, shouted Yukihiro Haruno with anger as she stood upright. Now it's all right, said Sarutobi as he held his hands up, silencing the people present. Why am I in the council room? Asked Naruto, his eyes gazing over all of the important people sitting in the same room as him. At least you know where you are, that helps, said the Sandaime with a slight smile. You're here, Naruto, because you've been in the Yondaime's home for the past 5 months, not once coming out. 5 months, repeated Naruto, shuddering slightly, wondering how he had lost so much time. Indeed, you were protected inside because nobody was able to get through the seal the Yondaime placed on the gate and the multiple barriers protecting anyone from getting over the walls, explained the Hokage. What we want to know is how you got in there. How I got in there, repeated Naruto as he crossed his legs and took up a thinking position. He sat there for a minute with his chin resting in the cup of his hand. The council watched him closely, holding a collected breath. I don't remember. A synchronized thud was heard on the civilian side of the council as each of them fell out of the seats they had been sitting on. The ninja side of the council had little chuckle amongst one another, with the knowledge that it was near impossible for an 8-year-old kid to remember what they did 2 weeks prior, let alone 5 months. What have you been doing over this time? Asked Sarutobi with a worried look across his face. I don't remember, said Naruto blankly, causing a few murmurs to spread around the hall. Lies, tell us how you did it, shouted one council member on the civilian side, earning a great number of glares from the ninja side of the council. What does he gain from lying? Shouted Sum at the top of her lungs while baring her canines in a vicious manner. To keep the Yondaime's secrets for himself, shouted another civilian council member. Unlike before, however, very few ninja heads had anything to say against it, knowing very well if they had been locked in the Yondaime's mansion for 5 months they would want to get the most out of it and learn as much as they could. It would be a golden opportunity which might have landed in the lap of a child. Enough of this, said Sarutobi in a defiant voice, silencing anybody who so much as thought of talking against him. He then turned back to Naruto and spoke in a much calmer voice. What's the last thing you remember? Once again Naruto resumed his thinking position. I remember going with Neji to his place and having dinner with him, Hinata and the Hyuga family, he recited. Later in the night Neji and I had a spar, but it was interrupted when Hanabi, I think that's what her name was, anyway, she was kidnapped by that ninja guy. I found and attacked him, hoping to slow him down so someone else could come rescue her. You expect us to believe that a demon such as you would lay your life down for a child you met earlier that day? Shouted a council member, but before Naruto could retort, Hiashi stood upright. This boy helped with the retrieval of my youngest daughter. Our family owes him a great honor and I will not let you ruin his good name, he shouted with anger radiating off of him. Several of the clansmen sitting around him backed away slightly in case Hiashi decided to throttle the man who had spoken. Continue, Naruto, said Sarutobi as the council calmed down and Hiashi reclaimed his seat. I remember that guy attacking me. He moved so fast before he stabbed me with his fingers, said Naruto, shuddering slightly at the memory. Then it felt like I had been struck by lightning and everything burned all over. I felt like I was going to die. I managed to get to my knees and saw that the ninja guy had his back to me and Naruto came to an involuntary stop as he began to shake as the memory invaded his mind. What happened? Asked a civilian member of the council who was tired of waiting for answers. He stabbed the Kumo nin in the back, said Hiashi, recollecting the moment perfectly. Naruto cringed at the words as another civilian voiced his opinion. You expect us to believe that a kid was able to defeat a fully trained ninja? She shouted, some of the council members still not believing that Naruto could kill a skilled opponent. A single kunai is capable of taking down the greatest of enemies, no matter what rank the person is who threw it, said the Sandame, silencing the crowd. The ninjas understood the message clearly, knowing that a surprise attack had the power to take down anybody unprepared. They all figured that since the Kumo Nin would have thought he would have fatally wounded Naruto if not killed him, he would never have been expecting an attack from behind. What do you remember after that, Naruto? Asked the Hokage. I don't remember anything, he said, shivering. I woke up this morning in a bed with no idea how I got there. Sarutobi nodded his head several times before looking into a darkened corner of the room. What do you reckon, Ibiki? Is he lying? He asked as a man stepped out of the shadows, showing several disfiguring scars across his face. Hardly, said Morino Ibiki calmly. I imagine that he went into a mentally shocked state after his first kill. His mind would have shut down and he would have run off of instinct. It just so happens that in that state he would have been able to get into the Yondaime's home. How can you be so sure? Aren't you going to torture the information out of him? Asked another council member. How can you even think of torturing a pup that young, you maggot? Shouted Sume aggressively, her voice backed up by the shinobi sharing her opinion. I may be cruel when interrogating the enemy, but to use my skills on a child less than 10 years old when there is no information to gain would be dishonorable, said Ibiki coldly. You civilians have never shed the blood of another, you've never killed a person with your own two hands. Many ninja will tell you that the kill they can remember the most is their first. Each ninja takes their first kill differently, some feel nothing, some feel sick, some even pass out. With that in mind, what is the likely response that a kid with no mental or physical training would do? The council chambers became silent, Ibiki's words reaching everyone's ears as he continued. From memory, the report from that council meeting when this was first discussed contained a statement from Neji Hyuga, saying that he had found Naruto sitting outside the Yondaime's mansion. Since his home had recently been destroyed, he would have gone to the place where he would have felt most comfortable, this case being the Yondaime's mansion. He managed to find a way in, a way which he is unable to remember and has no memory of what happened between then and now. Since that day there have been Anbu posted near the gates 24 hours a day waiting for the kid to leave, and after he arrives this is all the information we can gain. I believe we've gotten all we need to get from this meeting, said Sarutobi raising his hammer. This meeting is adjourned for the day, we will resume on a future date. With that moment he slammed the gavel on the podium, indicating the closure of the meeting. The council members left, the civilians not wanting to spend another moment in the same room as the demon brat. The ninja members of the council however came up to Naruto and tried to comfort him somewhat, rubbing his shoulders and giving him words of praise for what he had done. Thank you, he said through tearful eyes. Don't be sad, pup, it's all right, said Sume holding Naruto in a hug, pressing his head against her breast much like her daughter did. You've got bravery equal to those of knights, said Shikaku, finding a way to relate his words back to a shogi board. He looked at Inoichi, who nodded at him slightly, an unspoken message going between the two. I suggest young Uzumaki here should get going, said Shibi Aburame, wearing his dark sunglasses within the dimly lit room. There was momentary silence before several clan heads slapped their foreheads in frustration. How could we forget that it's the pup's first day at the academy? Said Sume, recalling she had taken her son there earlier this morning. I'll take you, Naruto, said Sarutobi, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder before he and Naruto vanished in a puff of smoke. I wonder who that could be, said Iruka. He had only just done the roll call and already someone was banging on his class's door. Walking over, he opened the door before stifling a gasp. Hokage-sama, he said with a slight stutter as Sarutobi walked in. Excited murmurs spread between the students. Iruka, I hope you don't mind if I add one more student to the list, said Sarutobi calmly. Not at all, Hokage-sama, said Iruka excitedly. Sarutobi nodded before he motioned for the person still in the hallway to enter. As the boy entered the room, several things happened between very specific students. For Hinata Hyuga, her cheeks reddened immediately as her eyes widened. Tenten, who had been sitting beside her, had a similar reaction as she rubbed her eyes several times to make sure she wasn't dreaming. Ino and Sakura looked at one another with mouths agape as they pinched one another to ensure this wasn't some twisted nightmare. Class, said Sarutobi proudly. I'd like you to meet Uzumaki Naruto. As Sarutobi left the classroom, there was no sound, only silence as the class stared at the blonde boy who stood with a cheery grin plastered on his face. He honestly didn't know what had happened recently, but those thoughts were pushed to the back of his mind. Naruto was getting a lot of different looks by his fellow classmates, many of them looking at him in awe with the knowledge of what he had done, while some of them looked at him in fear. Iruka looked around the classroom for a seat and only saw one available, Naruto having filled in the last gap the classroom would have had. Naruto, can you go sit by Sasuke? Instructed Iruka, pointing at the vacant spot beside the young Uchiha. Hinata and Tenten were disappointed, Naruto having been placed near the center of the class while they had chosen the front corner in order to learn as much as they could. In the time period during Naruto's absence, they had become close with one another, the young brown-haired girl able to help cheer up the Hyuga heiress after what had unfolded. They had waited for Naruto to return. It had become common knowledge as to where he was located, but due to the seals surrounding the mansion, nobody was able to enter. After 2 months, it had become rumored that he had died on the premises, either by lack of food or he had committed suicide, the guilt of taking another's life driving him over the edge of sanity. So when he had shown up in front of them as if nothing had changed, they knew they had to have a big chat with him during the lunch break. Ino and Sakura were having the same idea. Ino and Sakura weren't as unhappy with the seat placing, having originally chosen the seat behind Sasuke. After Naruto's absence for several months, Sakura's mother had deemed it alright for the pink-haired girl to study at the academy. It hadn't taken long for her and Ino to figure out it was because Naruto hadn't been around. As such, Sakura was slightly frightened that her mother would force her out of the academy, which she would hate. Ino and she weren't always on the same level as the recent months had shown, but that didn't mean that they weren't the best of friends. The friendship also extended to Hinata and Tenten. During Hinata's 8th birthday party, Ino, Sakura and Tenten had been the only ones invited from outside the family, something which made them feel privileged. Now to have the one thing which had originally connected them all together with them once again would be an experience in itself, having been without the blonde-haired boy for several months. As Naruto took his seat, he looked at Sasuke, who was glaring at him with all intents and purposes. It hadn't taken long for Naruto's exploits to reach his ears and couldn't help but feel somewhat proud of what the boy had achieved. He was looking for a similar experience to happen to him. Sasuke was fed up of being compared to his older brother and wanted to create a name for himself. His father rarely complimented him on anything, even if he was doing everything right. As such, he would be the top ninja of their grade, and the biggest stepping stone would be Naruto. A smirk crossed his lips as he eyed off the kid, thinking he could easily pick him apart and show his true worth. "Hey Sasuke," said Naruto cheerfully. "Naruto," replied the young Uchiha, a hint of happiness in his voice. This was so far the largest conversation either of them had had with one another, both parties coming from opposite sides of the social scale. Apart from that, they had had many non-verbal conversations. A simply nod of the head in the right situation could work wonders in an attempt to shrink the gap between social boundaries. Naruto would do so just to make more friends. Sasuke would do so in order to gain attention that he didn't obtain in his household. "Are you excited?" asked Naruto. "Maybe," replied Sasuke, and he smirked slightly as Naruto pouted at not getting a straight answer. "All right, settle down children," said Iruka, gaining their attention. "I am your sensei for this class and will be teamed up with an assistant every Wednesday and Friday. You are to make him feel welcome, am I clear?" "Yes, sensei," replied the class in harmony. "All right. If you lift up your desks, you will find all of the books you need for this class. Find the one labeled History," he said as the children opened up their desks to find a layer of books. As they found the specific book and closed their desks, Iruka continued, "Today's opening classes will be about historic moments of our time, from the founding of our village to the Third Great Shinobi War." 5 minutes into reading, a solid thud was heard as Naruto's forehead met the table. The news that Naruto had returned spread around the town in an instant, reaching the ears of Kunoichi, who was just as eager to get their hands on Naruto as their younger counterparts. A certain Inuzuka also heard the information despite being in class at the time. The mysteries of how rumors managed to spread so quickly would not be resolved today. Lunch couldn't come quickly enough for Uzumaki Naruto, who shot out of the door as soon as Aruka had said so. If he had known that the academy was going to be so boring, he would have brought earplugs. He wanted action and lots of it, but so far he had gotten none. He ran out onto the field and basked in the sunlight, feeling its warmth against his skin. He closed his eyes and fell onto the turf, feeling the grass underneath him. After being stuck inside for so long, while not being in hospital had been a torturous experience. As he opened his eyes, he got the instant feeling there would be another one as he saw Tenten, Hinata, Ino and Sakura looking down at him with very sour looks spread across their faces. Hi, he said nervously before they bent down and picked up an appendage. What are you doing? Cried Naruto as the four girls carried him off to the shelter of a nearby tree where a single swing hung by strands of rope from a soled branch. They placed him on the swing and stared at him intently. Naruto swallowed, thinking he was in deep shit before he was embraced with a hug from Hinata as she cried into his shoulder. Thank you so much, she said as tears fell freely from her eyes. The three other girls simply watched. They knew that Hinata hadn't had a chance to thank Naruto for what he had done and allowed her to express her feelings. They partially regretted this decision as Hinata leant back slightly before placing her lips lightly on his cheek. All four girls turned deep shades of red, Hinata due to embarrassment while the others were under the pretense of anger. Naruto sat there stunned before a wolf whistle from above them caught their attention. Naruto looked directly up to find himself staring straight up the Anko's skirt in a moment which would usually be found only in an Ika book. Pink, he muttered under his breath so nobody else heard it before Anko leapt down from the branch to stand beside the other girls. Anko turned and looked at him, but unlike the feral or overwhelmingly happy faces he had seen her make, this was one of sad anger. In an instant she had placed the cold steel of a kunai against his neck. Where have you been? She threatened, pressing the blade against his skin. Do you know how worried I was? I couldn't sleep for a week. Naruto just stuttered in response before Anko was pulled away by Ino and Sakura. Hinata was sitting on the ground, boarding between the lines of consciousness and the abyss. Anko knew that she could easily break free of the girl's grip, but doing so could potentially put either of them in hospital. Tenten took this opportunity as she grabbed Naruto's neck and started to throttle him. Where have you been? Do you know how worried I was? She practically yelled into his face, fire burning in her eyes. I forgot how much I like you, said Anko as she stopped resisting. Ino and Sakura looked at Tenten and were about to pry her off, but another beat them to the punch, knocking Tenten to the side and onto Hinata. As Naruto breathed deeply, allowing oxygen into his lungs, his head was pulled forward as he was embraced in a vicious hug. It's okay now, muttered Hana as Naruto flailed his arms wildly to the side. Hana looked curiously to what he was doing before noticing that she was holding him tightly into her breast, once again depriving him of oxygen. Whoops, she said as she released him, allowing him to breathe freely. Anko, Ino and Sakura had nothing to say to the fact as their attention was focused entirely on something else. Naruto placed his hands on his knees before tilting his head to the side and seeing a bizarre sight. Hana followed his gaze to see Tenten on top of Hinata, their eyes wide in shock as their lips touched one another, both parties too stunned to break the kiss. Hana quickly realized that she was the catalyst when she had buried Naruto in her bosom, knocking Tenten onto Hinata and causing the awkward situation. Only when Anko Wolf whistled did they realize they were being watched and broke apart, sitting next to one another in Caesar position 1. What did you do to my cousin? Shouted Neji from across the field, having seen the awkward position that Hinata had been in. He was currently rushing over with murderous intent, determined to purify Hinata's soul. By this stage many of the wannabe ninjas were watching the escapade in the corner of the field with curiosity. It was an accident, said Sakura, jumping in front of Neji to stop him from advancing, not wanting to see her friend get slaughtered. Move out of the way, what just happened was wrong, stated Neji, not in the mood to argue. You mean it's alright for a man and a woman to kiss but not two women? Asked Anko from the side as Hana now restrained Neji, feeling it was her fault. That's what I mean, said Neji, caught in his rage as Hana held him at bay. Anko didn't reply in words, rather she walked to where Neji was struggling with Hana before Anko turned the Inuzuka's head towards her own and planted her lips upon hers. Large parts of the field suddenly became stained with blood as numerous male students were blown back. Ino, Sakura, Tenten and Hinata's jaws dropped as they saw what was going on while Naruto's eyes couldn't get any wider. Hana made no sudden movements to get away from the Chunin, but not for long as she tore away. No tongue, sighed Enko as if disappointed, which in all reality she was. You stole my first kiss, shouted Hana, upset with what Enko had just done. But you did enjoy it, stated Enko rather than asking, and when Hana failed to say that she didn't like it, Enko pumped her fist in victory, before turning back to Neji, who had a trickle of blood leaking from his right nostril. See, it's perfectly normal for two women to kiss one another, maybe not in the Hyuga compound, but out here it's a different story altogether. Yes, said Neji plainly as he wiped away the blood with the back of his sleeve. I'm sorry for acting irrationally. Enko nodded at the response before turning to Sakura and Ino. Do you two want to try? She asked, but both of them shook their heads at a rapid rate, although Ino had paused briefly before doing so. What the hell is going on? Asked Naruto, thinking he had just walked into some adult film. All heads turned to him before every person in the vicinity was invading his personal space. Answer the question, growled Enko through gritted teeth. Where were you? Followed Sakura just to define what Naruto needed to answer. I don't know, mumbled Naruto in a tone that was barely audible. What do you mean? Asked Ino. I woke up this morning and I can't remember anything since that night, he said. Thankfully he didn't need to go into detail, everyone there knew what he referred to by that night. I have no idea how I got there, how long I was there, or anything in between. I'm scared. It's alright, Baka, said Enko, rubbing Naruto's shoulder for comfort. If you can't remember, perhaps it is destiny that you do not remember, said Neji. I thought you broke out of that habit, cousin, said Hinata, stuttering slightly, noticing the use of the word destiny. So did I, said Neji before focusing back on Naruto. Before anything else could be said by anyone, however, the bell rang, signaling that everyone had to return to class. Enko sighed, knowing that she wasn't allowed within the academy building after setting half a dozen snakes on the students in a drunken ploy. Guess I'll see you guys later so we can work on where Naruto is staying the night, said Enko before she leapt off towards the city. Where I'm staying? Questioned Naruto before he recalled that he no longer had a place to call his own. We'll work it out later, said Hana before breaking from the group. I'll see you guys after class. The remaining girls waved goodbye before she was followed by Neji, wanting to maintain his perfect record in order to ensure his place as top ninja in his grade. Hinata, Ino, Sakura and Tenten were about to walk back before they noticed that Naruto was still on the swing they had placed him on earlier. What's the matter, Naruto? Asked Tenten. I don't want to do more bookwork, he grumbled. We don't study after lunch, we do combat training, said Ino as all the life returned to Naruto's eyes as he beamed brightly. This is terrible, said Sarutobi as he looked at the sheet of paper he had just received. It had been delivered by Hawk, and as such it had been at least a day since the message had been sent. The content within the message wasn't classified, but reading between the lines it was clear that a secret of the village had gotten out despite it never being said. After all, it didn't take a genius to figure it out. Sarutobi was fairly certain the entire Nara family had figured it out in minutes, but didn't want to voice their opinion as it would be too troublesome. Is there a problem, Hokage-sama? Asked Rona, the assistant to the Hokage. She had been the one to deliver the message and had to wait around until the Hokage dismissed her appropriately. Since he hadn't done it instantly like usual, she figured that something was amiss. Give me a minute, Rona, said Sarutobi as he began to write on a piece of parchment. As he finished and placed a small emblem in the corner to show that it was genuine, he rolled it up and gave it to her. I would like you to go down to the academy and hand this to Iruka. There are instructions in there me must give to a student who will come meet with me later. Am I understood? Yes, Hokage-sama, said Rona, taking the scroll. She turned and left, leaving the Hokage alone in his room. He buried his head in his hands and groaned lightly as he looked over the original message once again. Damn it, Naruto, I'm sorry, but there may be no other choice. ... Naruto smiled broadly as Iruka went through the rules of the makeshift tournament. Every person in the class would be competing in a controlled environment to work out who had problems in different divisions and to create a class hierarchy. Most of the teachers at the academy thought it was a good idea to continuously announce who was ranked where in the class, as it would create more of a friendly competition, forcing the students to become stronger. The weekly rankings would be judged by combat ability and intellect in class before combing them both to make a solid result board. There were 32 males and 16 girls in the class, striving to become future ninjas of the village. Iruka chuckled as he assumed that by year's end that the number would have dropped dramatically, as they realized that a life of bloodshed was never meant for them. Listen up everyone, he shouted, getting their attention. I have written up a board to which I have already prepared the matches. If you wish to advance to the next round, you must defeat your opponent by knockout, submission, they willingly forfeit, or I call a victor. Under no circumstances are you allowed to continue attacking your opponent after the match has ended. We have specially blunted kunai and shuriken for you to use to prevent unnecessary bloodshed, and each of you will be given 3 of each to use per round. Only throwing weapons and taijutsu are allowed. Whether or not you know any ninjutsu or bloodlines, it doesn't matter, these are only friendly spars to judge your ranking. Sasuke smirked. He knew that his intellect was good, his mother having taught him a great deal since he was a child, and he was well skilled in his family taijutsu style for someone his age. By proving that he was the best in his class, he could prove to his father that he was worthy of being his son. Naruto snickered slightly but knew that deceit was a ninja's best friend. As such, he would need to restrain from showing off, too much at least. Quick girls, come here, said Ino in a hushed whisper, beckoning her friends to come closer. Tenten, Sakura and Hinata leant in to listen to what Ino had to say. The person who wins this competition gets to be the first one to kiss Naruto. Sakura's head shot up, and only Ino covering her mouth prevented her from yelling out at the top of her lungs. Hinata and Tenten looked at one another before turning their eyes towards the ground. Hinata rubbed the pads of her fingers across her lips, the taste of Tenten's lips lingering on them, the soft tenderness they had brought. She had no idea that Tenten was thinking similar thoughts, especially since afterwards Anko said it was normal for women to kiss one another, albeit neither of the two girls had ever seen it happen before. So if we win, we get to kiss Naruto-kun, stated Hinata, pressing her forefingers against one another in a nervous habit. That's exactly what I'm saying, said Ino cheekily. When do we do it? Asked Sakura. Whenever you get the chance, but the rest of us can't intervene in any way, and can't kiss him ourselves until that person has successfully kissed Naruto, explained Ino. The only way this contract can become void is if someone not from our group kisses him first, in which case that person will have waited too long and have lost the opportunity. What if it's his first time? Asked Tenten, nervous since it would be her first kiss with a boy. Once again her eyes drifted towards Hinata before looking straight back down at the ground. Makes it all the more special, said Ino with a devilish grin. You two might have had your first kiss, but Sakura and I still need to break that barrier. At the reminder of what had happened, Hinata's cheeks began to burn up. Tenten, however, saw a perfect opportunity. Well, if either Hinata or I win, you two have to kiss one another, she proclaimed, pointing at Sakura and Ino. You want me and Ino to kiss? Shouted Sakura in her inside voice. That's the condition, said Hinata, backing Tenten's claims. So the winner kisses Naruto, but if it's either Hinata or Tenten, then Sakura and I have to kiss, analyzed Ino, thinking it over. You're not going to do it? Questioned Sakura, afraid that her first kiss would be with her best friend. Don't worry, Sakura, what have we got to worry about? Boasted Ino. She then offered her hand, to which Tenten boldly took. Deal, she claimed. Deal, repeated Tenten before they released the handshake. First match, Hinata versus Jade, said Iruka, causing the Hyuga heiress to eep in shock. With the cheering of her friends behind her, Hinata made her way to the center field, where she looked at her opponent, who wore a plain pink t-shirt and some dark blue track pants. She was in a brawler's stance as Iruka gave both the girls the limited weapons. Alright girls, are you ready? Said Iruka as he raised his hand, and Hinata swallowed deeply, nervous about fighting one of her teammates without the use of her Byakugan. You can do it, Hinata, shouted Naruto from the sidelines with great audacity, his voice single-handedly drowning out every other sound the students were making. Hinata's eyes widened slightly at Naruto's willingness to cheer her on, and she turned back towards Jade. As Iruka's arm descended and the match officially began, Hinata's nervousness was all but gone as she slid into her family stance. Not only would she win this match, she would win the tournament in order to protect Naruto's lips. Hey there, my name's Kiba, introduced a young boy holding his hand out to Naruto. He quickly pointed to the white puppy on top of his head. This is Akamaru, he's really shy, he is only 6 weeks old. Nice to meet you, I'm Naruto, said the young Uzumaki trying to be nice. Kiba grinned before he began to start sniffing around Naruto. You smell different, he analyzed. Is that why my sister and all those other girls surrounded you? What do you mean? Asked Naruto, tilting his head to the side. He didn't mind the sniffing, to him it was funny. Me and the others saw you at lunch surrounded by girls, how'd you do it? Asked Kiba. Naruto sweated a little, he didn't have an actual answer to give. I don't know, they're my friends, he said as a tall woman walked past and handed a piece of parchment to Iruka, who took it in silence as Tenten fought against Nina. He studied it for a moment before his brows descended slightly. Meanwhile in the ring, Tenten made avid use of her shuriken to target the same spot on Nina's leg, causing the girl to cry out in pain. I give, she called out, she was having trouble putting her weight on that leg as bruising was already starting to form. Iruka's eyes snapped up from the paper and he declared Tenten the victor. He then asked for the 4 remaining competitors to stand in the fight zone. Tenten remained where she was while Hinata, Ino and Sakura all made their way next to Tenten. Hinata was easily the least damaged, even without her Byakugan activated she had been a force to be reckoned with. Tenten had only been forced into close combat once, but even then her opponent had been weakened by the number of shuriken and kunai which had struck her body. Ino and Sakura were looking the worst for wear. Neither of them were particularly good at hand-to-hand combat, but their resiliency to not lose the wager had pushed them through. We need to draw it to a close, so instead of having semifinals followed by the grand final we'll be having a 4-way fight, explained Iruka. This is good experience, because when you think you know what the situation is going to be, it can change on you in an instant and you have to rethink your strategy. Learn from this. Rules are the same with the last one standing the victor. Is this understood? Yes, sensei, they said in sync before they moved to the 4 corners of the makeshift battleground. Ino and Sakura were adjacent corners, but they looked at one another with a knowing look. Alone, it was likely that they wouldn't be able to defeat either of the 2 girls, so they needed to work together. Tenten already had a kunai in both hands, prepared to weaken the target of her choice. Hinata slipped into her stance. This match would determine everything. Who you going for? Kiba asked Naruto. Naruto thought for a moment, not particularly knowing who to go for since they were all his friends. All of them, he shrugged innocently, causing Kiba and all those listening to sweat drop slightly. Begin, commanded Iruka, issuing the beginning of the battle. Hinata charged towards Ino, who was charging at her when she felt a kunai hit her thigh. She looked to the left to see that Tenten had thrown it while the other one soared through the air and struck Ino on the arm. She's targeting the biggest threat, she thought before she was brought back to reality as Ino drove her fist into Hinata's stomach, knocking the wind out of the Hyuga princess. Ino was about to follow up with a haymaker when a shuriken hit with her knuckles, causing her to pull back in pain. Hinata had no time to reprise as she turned around to find Sakura charging at her. She grabbed the oncoming fist and executed a judo throw as she used her opponent's momentum to toss Sakura over her shoulder. The pink-haired girl hit the ground with a thud, but she was quickly back on her feet alongside Ino, who had recovered. Hinata watched expectantly, waiting for them to strike at one another, but they both charged towards her. Hinata swallowed as she began to defend against the number of attacks being thrown at her. She couldn't avoid all of them and took several blows to the chest and one light scrape across the jaw. Tenten didn't like what was happening. Hinata was being backed towards where she was, and if the 2 others would defeat her, no doubt she would then turn on her. She looked at her arsenal to see she only had a single kunai and 2 shuriken remaining. Duck, Hinata, she shouted before she threw her arsenal at Hinata's back. Acting on instinct, Hinata obeyed her orders and ducked as 2 shuriken flew over her head and hit either girl in the stomach. Immediately they stopped their advance as Hinata capitalized, driving an uppercut into Ino's chin, knocking the blonde-haired girl off her feet. Sakura was about to punch the defenseless Hinata when her arm was knocked off target as the final kunai hit her forearm. Hinata twisted on the spot and saw the opening and struck her palm into Sakura's open solar plexus. Sakura remained standing for a moment, both hands clutching her wound before she collapsed onto Hinata's shoulder. Hinata grabbed her gently in both hands before lying her on the ground next to Ino, both of them effectively out of the match. Hinata stood up and turned to find Tenten charging at her. Unlike her, Tenten had used relatively little energy, having been a long-range fighter the entire time. She sent her fist out, but Hinata caught it in her right palm. What she didn't expect, however, was for Tenten to kick at the inside of the thigh that she had hit earlier with the kunai. This blow caused her to fall backwards, but her grip on Tenten's hand was strong and she pulled the unexpecting brunette down with her. Wolf whistles and all manner of sounds were made as Hinata found herself once again underneath Tenten with their lips touching one another. Iruka's palm hit his forehead as Rona's jaw dropped, having decided to hang around to watch the final bout. Having broken out of the initial shock, Tenten was about to pull her head away when she felt Hinata's hand on the back of her skull holding her in place. Tenten was starting to freak out. She couldn't figure out what this meant until Hinata allowed Tenten's head back a bit, a cunning smile on Hinata's face. "I win," she said softly, holding a kunai in her spare hand at Tenten's throat. Seeing the kunai, Tenten couldn't help but giggle, knowing that Hinata had used the awkward situation they were in to capitalize and pull a victory out of nothing. "Winner, Hinata," announced Iruka to a round of cheers from the students as Ino and Sakura began to stir. Tenten got off of Hinata and held a hand out for the Hyuga heiress to take. Hinata took it with a smile as Tenten hoisted the girl to her feet before raising Hinata's hand in victory. "What happened?" asked Sakura as she and Ino got to their feet, leaning against one another for support. "I'll tell you what happened, you two have to kiss now," said Tenten with a smile spread across her face. Ino and Sakura's eyes went wide as they looked at one another before stepping apart nervously. "Come on now, don't go back on your word," said Tenten, urging them on. "You're not chicken, are you?" stuttered Hinata, wondering if whether or not she would be like that with Tenten since both times they had kissed had been by accident. Again she ran her fingers over her lips before her tongue came out and licked them, tasting the remnants of Tenten's lips against her own. Even though she had held the brunette there so she could grab a kunai from the pouch on her leg and steal victory, she couldn't say she didn't enjoy it. Ino and Sakura turned towards one another, their cheeks burning red at the embarrassment of what this would bring. Neither of them would show they weren't going to go back on a deal, even though Sakura would get Ino back for making such a stupid deal in the first place. They leant in closely, feeling each the breath of one another on their faces before Ino swallowed and leant forward, pressing her lips against Sakura's to another round of wolf whistles. The kiss barely lasted a second as both parties broke away instantaneously, the deed being done. "Let's just get the male competition out of the way," sighed Iruka, praying that a similar thing didn't happen when the boys fought. The boys' fights were a lot quicker than the girls' fights, each boy wishing to prove something straight off the bat and often leaving themselves open. Shikamaru had given up straight away, saying that fighting would have been too troublesome. Shino fought relatively well considering he wasn't allowed to use his bugs but was beaten by Sasuke in the semi-finals. In the first day Sasuke had already made a fan club of screaming female girls. How it happened so quickly he had no idea how, but he smirked at the idea. His opponent stepped onto the ground to confront him. He had had a relatively easy path to the finals, his only real opponent being Kiba, who he had fought in the quarter-finals. Uzumaki Naruto stood staring down the Uchiha of their class, who was determined to win this in order to prove to his father that he would make him proud one day. They smiled at one another, having gotten to understand one another during the lessons earlier in the day as they slipped into respected stances. Sasuke looked worried for a second. Each time Naruto had fought he had done so without the use of a stance, simply using the opponent's weakness and openings against them. This in turn meant that he had been holding back the entire time, which scared Sasuke, who was wondering just how strong this boy was. He belonged to no clan, so the stance he was using wouldn't be traditional, so he had no idea what to expect. "Ready, begin," shouted Iruka, causing the two boys to leap forwards. The screaming fangirls were shouting for Sasuke but were silenced as Naruto dodged the opening strike before forcing his elbow into Sasuke's stomach, knocking the Uchiha back skidding across the ground. Many of the boys who had fought against Naruto suddenly were very thankful that they hadn't had such a blow dealt to them. "Go Naruto!" shouted Ino, who had finally broken out of the stupor that the kiss she had had with Sakura had put her in. "You can do it, Naruto-kun," said Hinata, knowing that if he could defeat Neji then he had this in the bag. Sasuke got to his hands and knees, trying desperately to get his breath back as Naruto charged at him, intent on finishing this early. Sasuke whipped out a kunai and tossed it forward, the blunted point driving into Naruto's kneecap, causing the Uzumaki boy to trip and fall towards the young Uchiha. Everything went in slow motion as the girls saw Naruto's face heading straight for Sasuke's, and sure as hell shit would hit the fan if Naruto's first kiss was with a boy, despite the fact that their first kisses had been with girls. Thankfully, as Naruto was falling, he reached forward and grabbed the Sasuke's shoulders and used them as a springboard leap over the Uchiha, pushing him to the ground in the same instant. As he landed, however, he fell to his knees. The kunai strike to the knee had hit a tendon. Getting to his feet, Sasuke took this as an opportunity to strike, charging at the back of Naruto. Hearing his opponent coming, Naruto put his hands on the ground and pushed himself so that his body weight was supported by his hands before he drove both his feet into Sasuke's stomach. Spit and bile escaped Sasuke's mouth as he was sent flying backwards, his fangirls screaming about how Naruto's move was nothing more than a dirty trick. As Sasuke recovered his bearings, he couldn't believe what was happening. He was being shown up by someone who had had no formal training to his knowledge. If the rumors were true, sure, the boy had spent a great deal of time locked up in the Yondaime's mansion, but that didn't instantly make you a natural. Knowing he had to show his superiority, no matter the cost, he charged forward once again, knowing that he had one move he could use to show he was better, but it would get him disqualified. His father had taught him the move, and with the help of Itachi he had nearly mastered it. He stopped roughly 10 meters from where Naruto stood before his hands formed 6 hand seals in rapid succession. "No, Sasuke!" shouted Iruka, but he was too late as Sasuke executed his ninjutsu. "Kaden Gukakyu no Jutsu," he shouted before a ball of flames escaped his lips. Naruto's reaction was instantaneous as his hands flashed through several signs as the ball of flames headed directly towards him. "Futon Senpuken," shouted Naruto as he drove his right fist into the ball of flame. Iruka could only stand and watch in shock as wind circulated Naruto's hand at a remarkable rate as he drove it into the fire ahead of him. The wind caused the fire to span out and extinguish, leaving Naruto untouched and Sasuke livid with fear. Naruto blinked a couple of times, trying to figure out what just happened when pain started to surge through his right hand as the wind circulating it started to cut at his skin, sending splashes of blood to the ground. Naruto screamed out in pain before the technique vanished, allowing blood to flow freely from the cuts and run down his arm, causing some of the students to panic. "Someone get the school nurse!" shouted Iruka, rushing to Naruto's aid. Sasuke stood there floundered. His blast hadn't been overly powerful, nowhere near the strength of his father's or Itachi's. Yet Naruto had acted instantly and pierced straight through it, and that scared him. After much hassle, the academy nurse had come and fixed the cuts on Naruto's arms, although she noted that there was a lot of blood for such shallow cuts since she didn't know the wounds had already started to heal themselves. When she had left, Iruka turned to Sasuke, who hadn't moved the entire time. "Sasuke, why did you do something stupid like that?" exclaimed Iruka, yelling down at the young Uchiha. I, stuttered Sasuke. He had always been told that he would be the best from his father, that because of the blood that ran through his veins he would be the greatest ninja of his generation, but even when doing something against the rules he couldn't so much as touch him. The only real damage Naruto had taken had been from the kunai and from the jutsu he had done himself. "I don't know," he finally managed to say. "Well, as a result of your stupid mistake you will stay behind and write, 'I will not break the rules,' 200 times on the blackboard," said Iruka with a stern tone as Sasuke's head dropped in shame. He was not looking forward to telling his father why he would be late back to the compound. Iruka then turned his attention to Naruto. "What do you have to say about yourself? Where did you learn something like that? I've never seen any jutsu like that before." Iruka was trying his best not to sound impressed despite the fact he was. Naruto, who was surrounded by his 4 female friends comforting him, shook his head. I don't know Iruka-sensei, said Naruto shaking his head. I just saw the fire coming and acted. I can't even remember what hand seals I used, he admitted. I see, said Iruka holding his chin in the palm of his hand. I will discuss this with my superiors, but at the moment the Hokage is expecting you, you are to report there immediately. Okay then, said Naruto, still not entirely sure what was going on. Everyone's dismissed, said Iruka before pointing at Sasuke. In the classroom, now, he said sternly. Sasuke bowed his head before marching off to take his punishment while the rest of the class went their separate ways. That was amazing, Naruto-kun, said Hinata, recalling the jutsu he had performed. I wish I knew how I did it though, said Naruto looking at his hand, the cuts now all but gone from his skin. That looked really dangerous though, said Tenten, remembering how blood flew across the ground. Please don't do it again, said Sakura, whimpering slightly. I won't, said Naruto, smiling. Ino was nudging Hinata in the ribs lightly, tilting her head towards Naruto, who was oblivious to the signs. Hinata squealed lightly as she pressed her forefingers against one another, knowing that Naruto's lips were at least safe from the others around them until either she or someone else kissed Naruto. Naruto! Shouted someone from nearby, and the group turned around to see the bundle of energy known as Hanabi running towards them with her guardian following close behind. Hey Hanabi, said Naruto, waving as she stopped in front of them. Hello everyone, said Hanabi, bowing slightly, her female guardian nodding in praise behind her. They all had met once before when Hinata had invited them to her birthday party, an occasion which she was upset that Naruto missed. Naruto-kun, can I give you something for helping me back then? The kun prefix was not missed by those in attendance. I don't need anything, said Naruto modestly. Please, she said, batting puppy dog eyes. Okay then, he said, kneeling down so that they were eye to eye. Close your eyes, she instructed. Hanabi, what are you doing? Asked Hinata before Hanabi leant in and kissed Naruto lightly on the lips. She pulled away shortly after, giggling madly, covering her face with her hands as she blushed in embarrassment. Naruto's remained there stunned, his brain trying to figure out what had just happened between the youngest Hyuga and himself. Hinata was also shocked for 2 reasons, the first being that Hanabi had kissed Naruto before she had, and secondly, as a result, Naruto was once again on the market. Come on Lady Hanabi, let's go back to the compound, said her guardian, pushing her away. Hanabi nodded in acceptance before waving to the 5 of them. Bye everyone, she said before walking towards the Hyuga compound, her guardian behind her every step of the way. Finally Naruto snapped out of his trance-like state and stood upright. Come on guys, Hokage's waiting, he said slowly, unsure of the things going on around him. The kiss had only been a peck on the lips, but he could feel that there was genuine passion behind it. Too much had happened today. It hurt his head trying to think all of it over. Glad you're here, said Sarutobi, looking at Naruto standing before him, the fact that the 4 young girls had followed him like a posse not going unnoticed. We have something important to discuss. What is it, old man? Asked Naruto, finally in the right state of mind. This form I have in front of me relates to you directly, and it is from Suna, said Sarutobi. What does the hidden village of Sand want with Naruto? Asked Sakura, tilting her head to the side. The Hokage sighed as he held up the form for them to see. Do you know what this is? He asked. No, admitted Naruto. This is a marriage contract, he said, the 2 hidden Anbu getting a kick out of watching the kids' mouths drop. What? Screamed the girls in sync, shock clearly expressed across their faces. What's going on? Naruto's too young to marry, said Ino, seeing her hopes fly of being with Naruto fly out the window. Why would someone from Suna want to marry Naruto when he's never been there before? Asked Tenten. This contract is for the marriage between Naruto and the daughter of the Kazekage in the hope that it would strengthen the bonds between our 2 nations, explained Sarutobi. This is not something to be taken lightly. If Naruto were to refuse, the consequences could be dire, war being the most extreme case. The daughter of the Kazekage, repeated Hinata. Wait a second, no offense Hokage-sama, but normally when the daughter of someone important is married off, it is done so to strengthen clans by merging them together. Why would the Kazekage marry his daughter off to someone who doesn't have a clan? Asked Sakura, thinking the process through carefully. Sarutobi sighed, wishing that there was an easy way around this. He had wished for Naruto to be alone when he told this, but when news got out, seeing as it already had, everyone in the village would be seeing him in a new light. Like our village, Suna has spies in nearly every village and they've come up with some conclusions surrounding you, Naruto, he said with great wisdom. Kakashi, he said, causing one of the Anbu to drop from the ceiling at a remarkable rate, making his presence known. You may wish to speak freely about this once you hear it. Understood, said the silver-haired shinobi, taking his mask off to show another mask underneath, only leaving his right eye visible. What I am about to tell you is an S-ranked secret, but because of Naruto's recent actions a link has been formed. This spy has gone through the local resources and made a connection so many have ignored out of ignorance, hate or spite. The only way for someone to access the Yondaime's mansion is if he was able to adjust the seal to let their chakra signature be recognized as friendly and allow them to enter. It also recognized direct blood relatives of those people, explained Sarutobi. So I'm related to someone who the Yondaime trusted? Asked Naruto, uncertain if he was hearing everything correctly. Your mother, Kushina Uzumaki, was a long-time friend of the Yondaime. You would remember her, Kakashi, said the Hokage. We met on more than one occasion, he said with a shrug. Anyway, they became a couple but never married, partially due to Minato Namikaze's position as the Hokage, continued Sarutobi. When he wasn't in the office or in another country, he would be seen side by side with Kushina. They were practically inseparable. How romantic, said Ino with a sigh. 7 months before the Yondaime's attack against the Kyuubi, Kushina vanished for some time. Many thought she had gone on a diplomatic mission or had returned to her home country. The night that Naruto was born, Kushina appeared and was admitted into the hospital. Nobody knew where she had been hiding the entire time. However, due to certain conditions, Kushina was forced to give birth in a private area in the forest. Minato was with her the entire time, said Sarutobi. So this woman, Kushina, was my mother? Asked Naruto, to which Sarutobi nodded in agreement. But who was the father? Naruto-kun, said Hinata, getting the young boy's attention. She was pointing at a row of pictures hanging on the wall, each showing a picture of the Hokage soon after they were appointed to office. Her finger was pointing at Minato Namikaze and the girl's features slowly dropped as they came to the realization, looking back and forth between the picture and Naruto, making numerous connections. They then turned towards the Hokage for confirmation and he nodded his head. The reason that the Kazekage is sending his daughter to marry you, Naruto, is because you are the Yondaime's son, he said calmly. Naruto promptly fainted from the news. Iruka replayed the day's events over in his mind, especially the fight which had gone down between Sasuke and Naruto. It had been clear that Naruto was a skilled fighter, easily of genin quality already. Where he had learnt something like that, however, was another question. Then Sasuke's after-match attack using the Grand Fireball technique had been something in itself. The fact that it was AC rank ability was impressive. The size of the blast corresponded with the amount of chakra used to create the flame. By the way that Sasuke had been breathing afterwards, it was clear that he had used a majority of his chakra. This was not something to be surprised about. Being only first-year students, they hadn't been taught anything bar from what they had learned from their families. Then there came Naruto's ninjutsu, something which had damaged the boy in the process. Going over it, the technique was called Whirlwind Fist, and rightfully so. Whenever a wind jutsu came against a fire jutsu, the fire would simply consume the wind and grow in size. Even if they hadn't covered that in class, it was a basic concept. Yet the look on Naruto's face had shown that he knew exactly what he was doing despite not recalling anything afterwards. The speed of the wind surrounding his arm had increased the size of the fire, but it had pierced it as well, making an opening which prevented the boy from getting burnt. To think of such a strategy when under pressure showed immense skills in the thinking department, although from the fact he paid no attention to book work, it was more the in-battle thoughts. Iruka knew he would have to design some activities to help strengthen these attributes, as they were the dividing line between a successful mission and a failure. How many is that? Asked Sasuke, holding his cramping wrist in his left hand. Only another 40 to go, said Iruka, having kept track of the young Uchiha's punishment. Naruto, can you hear me? Yes. Who are you? How do you know my name? It doesn't matter who I am. As for how I know who you are, you could say I'm part of you. If you're a part of me, why do you sound female? It doesn't matter, alright. As for where we are in the depths of your mind. Since you're unconscious, it's black at the moment. How did you know what I was going to ask? Great minds think alike. It helps that we share the same mind. That doesn't explain why I don't know who you are. Changing topics, do you know why you passed out? Because I learned that my father was the greatest Hokage of all time. I wonder if I can be anything like him. Well, if you keep using those jutsus I teach you, you should be just fine. You taught me that jutsu. When did I learn it? Like I said, we share the same mind. Whatever I learn, you learn. Then when did you learn it? Sai, you're waking up now. Don't mention this meeting to anyone. Wait a minute, I have more questions. He's awake, said Tenten, noticing Naruto's eye flicker open. Hey, are you alright, Naruto-kun? Asked Hinata, thick with worry. I'm fine, I think, said Naruto groggily as he sat up. Looking around, he could see everyone looking at him. Even the second hidden Anbu had come down and was now standing next to the Hokage, his mask containing 2 orange stripes, one under each eye, and a yellow lightning bolt spreading over the face. This was completely different to the number of masks he had seen the normal Anbu wear, but he wasn't one to judge. So I'm the Yondaime's son. Sarutobi nodded his head in agreement. That's right, Naruto, and as such you are entitled to everything that he had, including your new home. With a flick of the wrist, the Hokage threw a scroll at Naruto, who caught it despite the fact he hadn't gotten to his feet yet. Opening it, he began to read the contents. That's the deed to the Yondaime's mansion. It is yours by right. You mean I have a home? Said Naruto in more of a question than anything. Well, when the Kage's daughter comes to visit in a little over a week, you best have somewhere for her to stay, said Sarutobi with a sneaky grin. What do you mean when she comes to visit? Shouted Ino, not liking the sound of this girl from Suna and the possibilities she would bring. It says right here in the contract, said Sarutobi, holding up the letter, causing Ino to face palm, regretting not having read the fine print when she had gotten the chance. If I may, Hokage-sama, said Kakashi, speaking up, I would personally like to train Naruto when he isn't present at the academy. Why would I want someone like you training me? Said Naruto as he finally got to his feet, the fact that he now owned property still playing in the back of his mind. Kakashi looked down at Naruto with his one visible eye. Your father was the one who trained me. I believe I should be the one to train his son, said Kakashi. I know the council will disapprove of this, but I feel honor bound to do this in memory of my sensei. I respect your wishes, Kakashi, and like you, I know the council will tear my ears off about it, along with the fact that Naruto is now staying at his father's place, said Sarutobi, deep in thought. You know as well as I that he would thoroughly enjoy the idea of his son being in the hands of someone as capable as you. So Naruto, what do you say? Asked Kakashi, looking down at Naruto to find the boy in tears. Naruto-kun, what's the matter? Asked Hinata. Oh. Sniff. Old man, could you tell me where my parents are buried? He asked, wiping the forming tears from his eyes. A smile spread across the face of the Hokage as he nodded. I think I can do one better. I'll take you there myself, he said as he stood up, the chair squeaking across the floorboards as it was pushed back. Before we go, I have a question, Hokage-sama, said Sakura, looking at the man once known as the professor. By all means, said Sarutobi, gesturing for her to continue. Since Naruto is the last of his clan, isn't it a Konoha to try and keep a family line like that alive through the use of polygamy? Asked Sakura, using her vast knowledge of council laws her mother had taught her at a young age. Polygamy? Asked Tenten, unsure of what the word meant. The look on Hinata's face showed that she didn't know either. It means more than one wife, explained Sakura, and instantly Hinata, Tenten and Ino's eyes lit up at the possibility that they still had a chance with Naruto. By law, Naruto is entitled to multiple wives so long as the council enforces the Clan Restoration Act by a majority vote. I'll be sure to push it forward tomorrow morning, said Sarutobi. He then turned to Kakashi. I want you to head down to the academy and tell Iruka about what is to happen with Naruto's training, at least that way he knows what to expect. Kakashi nodded before he vanished in a swirl of wind and leaves, the children watching it as if it was the best technique they had ever seen. Now let's go before the sun begins to set. With that, the children made their way out the room, Naruto shoving the deed to his house in the pocket of his shorts as the girls crowded around him. Sarutobi walked near the end of the pack with a smile across his face, happy to get that off of his chest as quickly as possible, the marriage contract and a copy of the deed locked away in his desk for safekeeping. Just behind the Hokage was the Anbu, who walked with a slight limp in his left leg which went relatively unnoticed. Uruka, said Kakashi appearing in the windowsill of the academy. Said Chunin looked at Kakashi just as Sasuke started on his last two lines. Hokage-sama told me to inform you that I'll be training Naruto in his spare time and mine, he said plainly. Before any sort of silence could settle in, the chalk piece Sasuke was holding snapped in the young boy's grip. Well, in that case I should tell you what I found out from my earlier analysis, said Uruka as he started explaining what the tournament had shown about Naruto's abilities. Kakashi's brow lowered slightly as he heard of Naruto defeating a fire jutsu with a wind. He sent a small glance over at Sasuke but looked back to Uruka expecting more. Sasuke couldn't believe the praise that Naruto was getting from his sensei. It was similar to what he heard his brother had received. After hearing that the boy's taijutsu skills equaled that of a genin made him feel a bit better about his loss, but that feeling came crashing down as the door to the room slammed open to show his father standing there with a scowl printed across his face. Father, he said aloud, dropping his chalk as he did so. Uruka and Kakashi looked to the doorway to see the head of the Uchiha clan staring daggers at them before he turned his attention towards Sasuke. Sasuke, why haven't you returned home yet? He asked in a stern voice, clearly annoyed that he had to come to the academy to find his son. Sasuke stuttered, afraid of the wrath his father might bestow upon him. He's been in detention, explained Uruka. He attacked another student with a Kaiden ninjutsu when it had been previously established that the rules only permitted taijutsu and throwing weapons. Fugaku looked at his son with fire in his eyes before they lessened and a look of disappointment spread across his face. May I know the name of the student my son attacked so I may apologize to their family, he said. He attacked Uzumaki Naruto, answered Kakashi, which caused Fugaku's eyebrows to rise slightly. I see, is he injured? He asked, but his voice lacked any sign of remorse. He is fine, he fought back against the jutsu with one of his own, said Uruka. Fugaku took this information in. Since Naruto had spent a good deal of time at the Yondaime's mansion, it was easy to figure out that he would have learned a few things, this jutsu being one of them. I understand, has my son finished his detention? Asked Fugaku, to which he received a nod. He quickly ushered Sasuke out of the room before leaving without another word. They both knew the trip back to the compound would be a silent one, Fugaku having much to say once they were behind solid walls. That was awkward, stated Kakashi, who sometime during the talk had pulled out his favorite little pocket book and was reading it intently. Thanks for the stuff on Naruto, I'll be sure to see what he is truly capable of. Uruka nodded as Kakashi vanished as quickly as he had appeared, leaving the sensei alone as he gathered his stuff to take home. So this is my mother's grave, said Naruto, looking at the tombstone which had his Kushina's name carved on it. Dark clouds gathered in the sky as Naruto knelt beside the headstone, openly crying. The girls stood in silence, watching as drizzle began to fall from the sky, slowly blanketing them in a wall of rain. They stood like that for 5 minutes, the rain dampening the mood even more so as Naruto mumbled incoherently, whether he was saying a prayer or his first hello it couldn't be figured out. Finally, his eyes raised up and he looked at the group. Where's my father's grave? He asked. Your father's name is on the memorial stone at the 3rd training ground, however there is no grave dedicated to him as his body wasn't found after the Kyuubi's attack, explained Sarutobi. It's believed that in its final act of hatred before it died, the Kyuubi ate him so that they would suffer death together. There was only silence afterwards, nobody really had anything to say after that as Naruto stood up and looked down at his mother's grave. He pulled a kunai out of his holster and held it to the palm of his hand before slashing it open. He then balled his hand into a fist, thick blood running through the gaps in his fingers, droplets of red liquid landing on the patch of dirt his mother was buried under. I swear on my blood, the blood of an Uzumaki and a Namikaze, that I shall become the greatest Hokage this village has ever seen. I will make you proud, Mum, Dad, he swore. I'm sure your parents already are, said Sakura softly, her pink hair saturated with rain. Naruto turned from the grave, looking more mature than he had only minutes ago. That was brave Naruto-kun, said Hinata, thankful that the rain was hiding her blush. You can do it, Naruto, said Tenten, giving him the thumbs up. If you show promise in years to come, when you reach Chunin rank I'll make you my successor, but only if I believe you're going to be the best candidate for the job, said Sarutobi, causing those around him to smile. Sure thing, old man, I'll be the best ninja there ever was, said Naruto. Respecting your superiors is a good start, said the Anbu who had been with them the whole way, startling the girls as they hadn't heard them say a word the entire time. Even the Sandaime looked shocked. The tone they had used, however, was one which instantly told Naruto to listen. Naruto turned towards the Hokage and bowed lightly. I will do my best, Hokage-sama, said Naruto. I should be going, my father will be worried sick, said Hinata softly. I think it would be for the best if we all head off, you wouldn't want to be sick on your second day, said Sarutobi, causing the children to run off through the streets towards their respected homes. He then turned towards the Anbu who was still standing there. For the 3 years you have served me, that is only the second time you have spoken, the first being when you pledged your allegiance. You appeared 3 years ago and was able to defeat the Anbu who were guarding me at the time and swore you would protect me. I still don't know why I did what I did, but I believe it was for the best. Even when we first met you were wearing that mask, and as such I respect your privacy. I shall see you in the morning. Sarutobi turned and walked away, knowing that the likelihood of him getting an answer was next to none. He turned his head to look back to find that they had already left, a few leaves drifting in the wind and rain where he had been standing. A small smirk crept up on Sarutobi's face as he tilted his hat and made his way into town. Fugaku sat on the designated mat in the secret meeting room underneath the Nakano shrine, part of the circle which was filled with the Uchiha elders. So it is settled then, he said, to which they all nodded. In 14 days, the Hokage will die and the Uchiha will take their rightful place as the head of the village, said one of the elders. Once you are the Godime, you must make a statement to show that you will not be seen as a weakling. How do you propose to do this? Asked another elder, looking directly at Fugaku. There will be a public execution, he said coldly, no remorse in his voice. Whose head shall roll in order to keep peace in the city? Asked the first elder, knowing that if the person chosen was seen in a good light it would go down poorly and there might be a riot. Fugaku lifted his head, his eyes focusing on the roof as flames danced in such a way they illuminated the room dimly. I shall take the head of Uzumaki Naruto. I had my first kiss today, father, squealed Hanabi, her cheeks crimson from blushing. Hiashi, a man whose facial expressions were usually limited to one, had his eyebrows raised as his eyes went wide and his jaw slacked. Who did you kiss with? He asked in an exasperated voice as Hinata entered the room. Naruto-kun, she said before she covered her mouth with her hands, giggling profusely behind her palms as if this was simply a game. Hiashi sighed, relieved that his daughter had kissed her savior, clearly an act of appreciation. The giggling though he would have to fix, as a Hyuga it was shameful to allow your emotions to be so visual. He had to remember though that she was only 4 years old, having celebrated her 4th birthday only recently. He turned his attention to Hinata who sat beside her sister. How was your first day at the academy, Hinata? He asked, his stoic face back to its normal form. Please do not inform me that you also kissed Naruto on this day. Kiss, said Hinata, starting to sweat bullets, which was immediately picked up by Hiashi whose palm connected with his forehead. You didn't you? He said with a moan. No, I didn't kiss Naruto-kun, but I did kiss someone, she stuttered, nervous vibes starting to overtake her body. Hiashi's eyebrow raised slightly. This was not what he had expected, especially since it was clear that his daughter had a crush on the young Uzumaki. Well then, who was the boy? He asked. Hinata's forefingers started pressing against one another as she tried to figure out a way to say this properly. Well, you see, the thing is, their name is Tenten, she stuttered. Hiyashi blinked a few times at the information, thinking he had heard it wrong. Isn't Tenten the girl with buns in her hair? Asked Hanabi, to which Hinata nodded before a resounding thud informed the two girls that their father had just fainted. So this is my home, said Naruto as he stood in the center of the front doorway. Our home. Who's there? Shouted Naruto. It's me, the one in your mind, you forgot already. I thought I had to be knocked out to talk to you, said Naruto. No, but if you started talking to me in public you would probably regret it, you're looked at differently enough as it is. That's true. Wow, I can't believe that silver-haired ninja is going to be my teacher, said Naruto, pumping a fist in victory. You want to show him just how good you are? Yay, that'd be awesome. Then go into the living room and start looking through the scrolls so you're ready for the morning. Wait, if you know them already, why do I need to know them? I thought we shared the same mind. Asked Naruto. This is so you actually know what you're doing. Come on, the quicker you do it the sooner you can have dinner. Remember, I'm here though, so if you so much as think of skipping something you'll never hear the end of it. Naruto swallowed deeply. Somehow the voice inside his head was successfully threatening him. He didn't really mind though as he walked into the living room and picked up one of the scrolls. If he was able to learn this stuff once before, then he could do it again, especially with a helpful voice whispering in his ear every couple of minutes. 7 days had passed since the day the Hokage had faced the greatest rival at the council which he had ever seen, yet he hadn't regretted a minute of it. Despite heavy dispute in the form of the civilian council backed solidly by Fugaku Uchiha, nothing had been changed. From that day, Naruto had remained at the academy doing well in his physical studies, but he apparently had the same hatred for studying that his mother once had. Although apparently his additional training with Kakashi was greatly helping the boy, no doubt he could follow in Kakashi's footsteps and graduate after only a single year at the academy. Looking over Kakashi's current report, the taijutsu Naruto expressed would make Guy proud and scream about the powers of youth within someone so young. He couldn't find a style that would truly suit him at the moment, but Sarutobi knew that would come in time to find what he was so comfortable with. From the report it said that Naruto used 3 different styles depending on the situation that appeared before him, including a style which was only seen by one other ninja in the village. He made a mental note to ask Anko what connection she had with the young Namikaze, in that she would teach him the style taught to her by one of his former students. Naruto's genjutsu skills were almost non-existent, although the henges he could perform were picture perfect and only those who were highly skilled in genjutsu would be able to see through it. Sarutobi thought of all the possibilities this could bring if Naruto were to grow up to be an infiltration expert, but then he remembered Naruto's personality. While initial infiltration would be plausible at best, the chances of him getting out without making a scene were nearly non-existent. His knowledge of ninjutsu seems astounding for someone his age. Clearly he was doing a lot of study in his spare time. The problem was though that he had very little chakra control, which wasn't something you could easily teach a child who wanted nothing more than to show off his latest move. It wasn't Kakashi's fault if he couldn't get Naruto to sit still long enough to perform the leaf balancing exercise for extended periods of time, it just wasn't something that could be done. The kid had way too much energy and Kakashi had never taken on a genin team before, so he had no experience teaching kids. The Hokage sighed as he placed the report down in front of him as there was a knock on the door. Come in, he said audibly enough so that the person on the other side could hear. The door swung slowly open to reveal Hiyashi Hyuga standing there upright, several forms in his hand. Hiyashi, what can I do for you? I wish to arrange a marriage with my eldest daughter and the last remaining Namikaze, he said in a neutral voice as he stepped forward, placing the sheets gently on the Hokage's desk. Is there a specific reason for this marriage? Asked Sarutobi with the knowledge that Naruto's potential bride-to-be would be arriving within the next 24 hours. After what happened, I believe that I owe him a great gratitude, explained Hiyashi. The only true way I believe for this to come about would be through an arranged marriage which would make him like a son to me. How did your clan treat this idea? Asked Sarutobi, trying to source out all of the necessary information. The man once known as the professor didn't miss the small twinge of the eye, and Hiyashi knew it as he sighed, knowing now that he had to tell the truth. Only my brother knows of these plans, he admitted. I knew that the elders would reject my claims and threaten to have me stripped of my rank as the head of the Hyuga clan, hence why I came in secrecy. Why is it then that you told your brother? We have shared things amongst one another more recently, and I believe it is due to the effect that Naruto had on us. Not only did he save my daughter's life, but he was able to re-establish a connection once lost between brothers, said Hiashi genuinely. While the final result rests in Naruto's hands, I have no doubt that he would accept, said Sarutobi, which caused Hiyashi's lips to tweak upwards ever so slightly. However, there is already a suitor who is coming by soon who is already arranged to be married. She will be here within 24 hours and is sought after by many potential suitors due to her heritage. Might I inquire into who this young lady may be? Asked Hiashi. Sarutobi leant forward, his fingers intertwining as he rested his chin on the back of his palms. While I wish to tell you, in order to keep relations with our allies at what they are currently, I must humbly refuse, he said. I understand, Lord Hokage, said Hiashi with a slight bow. If I may, I will now take my leave now that my business is done, but first I must ask one more question. Is the boy entitled to the Clan Restoration Act despite the fact you haven't mentioned it in the council, knowing the reception you would likely receive? The smirk Sarutobi sent him was all he needed to see. ... What are we going to do today, sensei? Asked Naruto excitedly, hardly containing his joy of being out of normal classes and jumping into more advanced ones. I've did a lot of research last night and found out some cool moves like this double S technique called the blood clone. I haven't tried it yet though, there's like 50 hand seals needed. Since you seem to hate the leaf training exercise so much, we're going to move on to something a little more difficult and challenging, said Kakashi, plainly causing Naruto's eyes to light up. He had called Naruto to the training ground which had the memorial stone in it, which gave Kakashi something to look at while Naruto was practicing. Thankfully, it was also a training ground which had a good number of trees. You're going to be tree climbing without the use of your hands, something which is usually taught to genin teams when their sensei believes they are ready. So what does this do? Asked Naruto. He enjoyed his lessons with Kakashi greatly more than he did with Iruka, despite the fact he was a good teacher. He didn't like his other teacher Mizuki. He had only been there on 2 days, but he felt the same hatred radiating towards him from the Chunin that some of the villagers had. Instantly he had felt distrust for the man, and he had shown nothing in any ways to say that he wanted to become friends. It will teach you better chakra control, as the feet are some of the hardest places to circulate a constant flow of chakra. That being said, they are also one of the most used places, explained Kakashi. The earlier you master this task, the swifter you can become a true ninja of the hidden leaf. Can you show me? Asked Naruto, struggling to keep his excitement to a normal level. Kakashi simply nodded as he walked towards a tree before placing his left foot on the bark. Naruto watched with wide eyes as Kakashi placed his right foot above his left, steadily making his way up the tree. As Kakashi got to a steady branch to look down at Naruto, he found the boy sprinting towards a tree at full pace before trying to run up it, and failing badly, his head bouncing off the ground. You need a constant flow of chakra in order to do this properly, explained Kakashi. Too much and it will push you off, too little and your feet won't stick to the surface. The slower and more controlled you can perform it, the better skilled you will be. When you can walk up and down without falling, the skill of your attacks ninjutsu will increase and be more controlled, allowing you to use your attacks without injuring yourself. Naruto rubbed the back of his head nervously at that comment. Each time he had shown Kakashi a new move he had learnt from the scrolls, with the help of his little friend, he had ended up hurting himself each time. Ranging from various cuts, to burns, to even finding his legs trapped underground. Kakashi smiled at the thought that someone who didn't even know what natural elemental affinity he had was trying to work jutsus in every department, reminding him of himself somewhat. He chuckled slightly as Naruto concentrated deeply, before attempting the skill once again, successfully getting 2 steps up before being blown backwards, having put too much chakra into his second step. That should keep you entertained until your guest comes up later, said Kakashi, smirking behind the mask. Work on it until dinner. Remember your meeting with Hinata later to work on your etiquette. My eti what? Asked Naruto, losing concentration and hitting the ground again. Your good manners, said Kakashi, simplifying it with a sigh as he leapt to the ground, landing without a sound. After all, you've got your guest coming at some stage tomorrow, want to make a good impression. Naruto smiled at that, knowing that this would be the first time Hinata or anyone for that matter, had been allowed at his house. He had been hassled by Sasuke's father twice about being allowed to access jutsus which would help better their clan. Naruto had noticed, however, that Sasuke had acted cold to him lately, but not in the hating way that many of the civilians had shown him for many years. It was as if the boy wanted to be friendly with him, but something was not letting him. No doubt that his father didn't want his son to associate with him. As such, Naruto didn't feel any animosity towards the young Uchiha, as it was probably something he had no control over. He shook his head side to side lightly, clearing his head as he prepared to scale the tree again. Fugaku eyed Naruto carefully through the trees, watching the boy with a certain amount of interest. It was not the danger he possessed once his plan came to action, but rather the guardian who seemed to have taken a keen liking to the boy. No doubt the Anbu captain already knew of his presence, so he wouldn't approach the boy again. A smirk graced his lips as he cherished the thought of severing the boy's head himself once he held the seat of Hokage. With that cruel thought in mind, he slipped into the shadows, heading back towards the Uchiha clan complex. Wow, this place is amazing, Naruto-kun, said Hinata as she admired the inside of the mansion. As far as she knew, she was the first one who Naruto had allowed onto his property. Sadly, the moment was joined by one other. I'm speechless, said Sakura, brushing a lock of pink hair out of her face. When the other three girls had learned of what Hinata was going to be doing after school with Naruto, they had another contest to see who was going to go with her. Thankfully, due to a poor decision on Tenten's behalf, Sakura won the challenge by getting the highest score when they had their history tests returned. As such, Sakura had accompanied Hinata to Naruto's mansion despite the dispute the young Hyuga put forth. I'm glad you guys like it, said Naruto, rubbing the back of his head, chuckling. He had spent the entire day tree climbing and was able to get up to the top without much trouble, but going down while trying to balance the shift of weight and gravity was difficult. How do you keep it so clean? Asked Hinata. I've found a few seals around the place. After looking at a few of my dad's scrolls, he even invented jutsus which prevent the build-up of dust, said Naruto. Amazing, admired Sakura. She shook her head, snapping herself out of the stupor she had been in, and looked towards Naruto. So are we going to do this, whatever this thing is? You don't know why you're here? Asked Naruto in confusion, as he had no idea of the contest which had taken place earlier. Sakura looked away as a tinge of red covered her cheeks, having been caught out. Sakura's here to help with your lessons, Naruto-kun, said Hinata, spotting the hole that Sakura had dug herself. Oh, okay then, since you're so smart you should know about this etiquette stuff, said Naruto, recalling how Sakura had gloated her 100% test result in class. ETI what? Asked Sakura, not understanding the gibberish Naruto had spurted. Etiquette, said Hinata slowly, causing Sakura to nod in understanding. Since your guest is coming tomorrow, we need to make sure Naruto-kun knows proper manners. That makes a lot of sense, said Sakura, recognizing the danger Naruto could be in if he ended up insulting the daughter of the Kazekage. Also, having known Naruto for the short time that she knew that if something could go wrong, it would go wrong. She truly liked the blonde-haired boy, and against her mother's wishes she continued to hang out with the new Namikaze. Her mother refused to call him by his father's name, saying that it was a disgrace to entitle such a name of power onto someone like him. As she realized what she was going to be teaching him shortly, she hoped that her mother would then be able to see him in a better light. Alright, and Naruto-kun, the first lesson is about how you greet someone of a high status, said Hinata, getting started. You must be polite, stand you upright, and speak clearly at all times. All times, groaned Naruto, not liking that idea so much. That means that you can't do thing like pick your nose, said Sakura, recalling how she had caught Naruto doing that disgusting habit in class. Or be so loud, said Hinata. Fart, said Sakura. Say rude things, said Hinata. Naruto could only groan as the two listed off one thing after another, and step by step he was not looking forward to the next day. Thanks for everything, guys, said Naruto as he walked the two girls to the gate. Is there any way we can get in without you having to be here? Asked Sakura. If I remember correctly, if you put your hand on this side of the seal and pump a bit of chakra into it, then the other side will be able to recognize you and let you in, said Naruto. Your dad was really smart, wasn't he? Said Hinata. Yeah, I guess so, said Naruto, hanging his head. Sakura and Hinata stopped where they were, realizing that they may have upset him. Sakura walked up to him and placed her arms around his torso, giving him a gentle hug. Thanks for the night, Naruto, she said softly before letting go and placing her hand on the seal in front of her. As she did her part, Hinata gave Naruto a hug, albeit blushing all the while. Instead of commenting like Sakura had, once the pink-haired girl had successfully opened the gate, she ran out of it, squealing all the while and trying not to faint. What was that all about? Asked Naruto. Girl stuff, answered Sakura, pulling the gate closed behind her. Night, Naruto. Night, Sakura, said the blonde-haired boy with a small wave as she walked towards her house, no doubt trying to find some excuse to tell her mum why she wasn't home earlier. He turned and made his way back towards the mansion, his stomach telling him that it was about time to eat. As he made his way through the library, his eyes fell upon the SS-ranked scroll he had discovered earlier that day. I did do that exercise earlier, he said as curiosity got the better of him. He wondered why a simple clone jutsu would require a SS ranking, but he brushed this aside when he saw a small note on the bottom. Use in wide open area. Listening to the scroll's advice, Naruto stepped outside with the technique in hand. A small wind was picking up, so he went near the straw dummies, using kunais to pin the scroll into the ground. He went through the hand seals slowly at first, gathering a memory of them in his head. This is a bad idea, said the female voice in his head, but he was concentrated on the jutsu at hand, all other thoughts pushed out of his head. Usually he listened to her, but when he was determined to do something he wouldn't stop until he had accomplished it or was unconscious with exhaustion. For 15 minutes he went through the seals until he felt that he had them down. Looking directly forward, his hands were a blur as they went through the hand seals in perfect sequence before he finished on the final one. Ketsuki Bunshin no Jutsu, he shouted at the top of his lungs. For a moment nothing happened before the wall behind him and the straw dummies surrounding him were showered in a wave of blood as Naruto collapsed to the ground. The procession made their way through the forest, following the pathway made many years earlier. For those who had never left the desert heat and sun, this was a different experience altogether. For the daughter of the Kazekage, this was the first time she had left her homeland, having not officially become a trained genin. She was 11 years old and betrothed to someone she had never met before. The thought of which was not a pleasant one. She did know her duty towards her home and more importantly her father. The marriage was to strengthen the alliance between the two villages, or so she had been told. Somehow she believed that there was something darker lurking underneath everything, as her father had turned away many marriage contracts over time from a number of noble clans within the hidden village of Sand. Now she was to marry someone of a different village whose father had had hundreds if not thousands of enemies across the world. Something didn't add up. She shook her head of these thoughts as the gate neared in view. She, along with her 6 Jonin companions, approached the entrance to Konoha. Each Jonin was a weapon specialist, focusing on their sword work, and as such they each carried a katana by their side. Standing along the gate doors were a number of ninjas, but standing on their own in the center were the Hokage of Konoha and a small boy, no doubt the boy she was destined to marry. As she got closer she couldn't help but notice the boy's looks, despite the fact he was 3 years her junior. He had a certain charm about him which made him sort of cute, and the whisker marks on the side of his cheeks helped his aura even further. She stopped a few meters away from them as the 6 Jonin lined up behind her. Greetings, said the Hokage as he opened his arms with a welcoming gesture. She shuddered slightly at this. The only time she had seen the Kazekage move his arms in such a gesture was to send someone to their death on a near impossible mission. The presence this man had, however, was much gentler and sincere than that of her father. She couldn't tell whether or not it was due to the fact he was 20 years his senior. Lord Hokage, she said, bowing lightly. You must be Tamari. Welcome, said the Hokage, bowing slightly. He then gestured to the boy by his side. This here is Namikaze Naruto, and he will be your host over the course of your stay. At the mention of the name Namikaze, the Jonin surrounding Tamari shuddered slightly as the boy walked forward. Naruto extended a hand towards Temari. It's nice to meet you, he said kindly. Temari couldn't help but smile at the boy, clearly he was as uncomfortable in this situation as she was. She took the hand and gave it a light shake. Likewise, my name is Temari, she introduced. I look forward to having your company until you depart, said Naruto, but the way he said it was as if he was reading off a script and the words were not of his own, causing her to chuckle slightly. Just as the situation seemed to be warming up, the boy's eyes focused sharply, as if there was killing intent behind them. That was the only warning she received before she was pulled forward and behind Naruto, landing in the arms of the Hokage. She turned around in shock to find Naruto looking at her, blood dripping from his lips with 6 katanas impaled through his stomach.